Many today are familiar with the ancient Hebrew text known as the Book of Enoch, attributed to Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah. This apocalyptic scripture recounts events that align with biblical lore, such as the Great Flood, but also includes many details that the canonical Bible does not explicitly explain. Central to this narrative are the Watchers, the sons of God, who are portrayed as angels that defied God's will by mating with mortal women. These Watchers, essentially fallen angels, are not explicitly recognized in the Bible but play a crucial role in the Book of Enoch. Their actions are depicted as the cause of great calamities upon the earth, ultimately leading to God's decision to send the flood. The union between the Watchers and mortal women resulted in the birth of the Nephilim, giant beings with voracious appetites and violent natures. These monstrous offspring devoured not only crops and animals, but also humans, and even turned to cannibalism. The chaos and destruction they wrought upon the earth reached the ears of God, who was deeply displeased by the betrayal of his angelic watchers and the havoc they had unleashed. In today's exploration, we delve into the fate of the Nephilim as recounted in various texts, including the Book of Enoch, the fragmented Jewish follow-up known as the Book of Giants, and the Bible. Interestingly, the Bible suggests that giants continued to exist on the earth, even after the flood, implying that they either survived or were somehow restored. According to Enochian legend, the Nephilim were born to the Watchers and their human mothers, who were seduced or perhaps violated by these fallen angels. While it is not specified whether these Nephilim were born as giant infants or fully grown, they are described as wicked beings who consumed everything in their path, including each other. The world fell into distress, and the cries of humanity reached God, who decided to intervene. To restore balance, God dispatched his archangels to purge the earth of this evil. Archangel Michael was tasked with confronting Sumiaza, the leader of the Watchers, who had failed to prevent his followers from sinning and becoming fallen angels. Archangel Raphael was sent to capture Azazel, a Watcher who had revealed heavenly secrets to mankind and taught them the ways of war. Archangel Uriel warned Noah of the impending deluge, advising him to hide until the floodwaters receded, as he and his family were chosen to survive and renew the earth. Meanwhile, Archangel Gabriel was commanded to deal with the Nephilim. As the Book of Enoch, chapter 10, states, "Proceed against the bastards and the reprobates, and against the children of fornication, and destroy the children of fornication, and the children of the Watchers from amongst men, and cause them to go forth. Send them one against the other, so that they may destroy each other in battle. For what length of days shall they not have? And no request that they make of thee shall be granted unto their fathers on their behalf, for they hope to live an eternal life, and that each one of them will live 500 years. As we can see from these interactions, we learn quite quickly that whilst the Nephilim did run riot on the earth, their days were numbered. Indeed, Archangel Gabriel is seen to go on a killing spree as he reduces the number of Nephilim that are running rampant. Any that he manages to miss are taken care of by the flood, which God sends to destroy all life on earth, except for Noah and his family. Now, whilst all the giants do drown in this story, we are told that their spirits survive, and that from then onwards they would be known as evil spirits that dwell on the earth. Of these spirits, God tells Enoch, and the spirits of the giants will afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth, and cause trouble. They will take no food, but nevertheless hunger and thirst, and cause offense. And these spirits shall rise up against the children of men and against the women, because they have proceeded from them." Book of Enoch, chapter 15. So indeed, the physical giants are destroyed, and they can no longer consume the landscape of the earth. They can no longer terrorize mankind. Nor can they go about their violent rampages. For all intents and purposes, the reign of the giants ends here, but as God tells Enoch, they do remain on a spiritual plane where they can oppress, destroy, attack, and work destruction on the earth. Arguably, They are not dead at all, considering that in their spiritual form they continued the exact same behavior that they did when they were physically living. So in this aspect you might say that the Nephilim did survive the flood, just not as they had originally intended. We do know why God keeps the Nephilim alive in this capacity, and that's to apparently punish mankind for their involvement with the Nephilim's production and for the events that had transpired. The men, as we learn from the Enochian legend, had fallen for the Watchers' knowledge and lapped up the secrets of heaven that the Watchers had revealed, whilst the women had allowed themselves to be seduced by the Watchers. Assuming we go with the idea that they were seduced and not taken against their will. In effect, God kind of blames mankind for the Nephilim too. So he allows the Nephilim to live in their spirit form to punish mankind for their transgressions. These events coincide with the apocryphal Jewish book in the Book of Giants, though of course in this story the perspective is shifted to that of the Nephilim. Specifically, we see the giant Malwe come to terms with nightmares that he and his fellow giants are experiencing, and they begin to fret over the possibility that these dreams are signs that they have done terrible things and would be punished for them. Eventually, Mawai is convinced to visit Enoch, whom they believe can interpret the dreams, which Enoch reveals is indeed a bad omen for the giants, who will pay for the carnage they have amassed and never know peace. However, there is implied hope for the Nephilim, because Enoch explains that if they change their ways and if they relinquish the bonds of evil, they will be forgiven. Unfortunately, it would appear that either none of the Nephilim were able to repent, or God wasn't feeling particularly forgiving because none of them appeared to be spared. As with the Enochian legend, God does send a flood to wipe out the Nephilim, and those that are able to escape the flood are hunted down by angels. In fact, in the Manichaean version of the Book of Giants, God actually sends the biblical monster Leviathan to mop up those who have escaped drowning. Ultimately, both texts are so fragmentary that it is hard to come to a definitive conclusion, though it is agreed that from what we have, the giants are destroyed by God either in the flood or by the angels he sends to have at them. In the Bible, meanwhile, the Nephilim are acknowledged as having existed as we are told in Genesis. The Nephilim were on earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old men of renown. As we can see here, the Bible does not go into the detail that the Book of Enoch does with the Watchers and just how the Nephilim were created unto the world. Indeed, we are told that the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. And this is closest we get to the suggestion that angels had impregnated women. That is, if we go with the idea that the sons of God are not men but actually angels. When the flood does arrive in the next chapter, the Bible does not subscribe to the idea that the Nephilim continue to exist as evil spirits on the earth. Once the flood comes, it is implied that they, amongst every other creature that didn't make it onto the ark, were destroyed in totality. We are told the waters rose and covered the mountains to a depth of more than 15 cubits. Every living thing that moved on land perished. Birds, livestock, wild animals, all the creatures that swarmed over the earth, and all mankind. Everything on dry land that had the breath of life in its nostrils died. Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out. People and animals, and the creatures that move along the ground and the birds were wiped from the earth. Only Noah was left and those with him in the ark. Genesis 7:20-23. So with this in mind, it should be pretty much guaranteed that we'd never see the Nephilim again, right? Well, not exactly. Several chapters later in Numbers, we are told that Moses sends several men to scout and explore Canaan, which has been promised to be given to the Israelites by God, so that they might discover what the land is like, whether the people who live there are weak or strong, whether the towns are fortified or unprotected, whether the soil is fertile or poor, and generally find out what kind of resistance would await them. Now the scouts do go out across Canaan and learn many things. They find fruit of the land, they find milk and honey. and they research the people who live there, the Canaanites, and find them to be very powerful, who live in cities that are large and fortified. But there is one discovery they make in Canaan that they probably wish they hadn't. The Nephilim had seemingly returned. The scouts report to Moses, "We can't attack those people, they are stronger than we are." And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. They said, "The land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size." We saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. Numbers 13, 31-33. So how could this be if the Nephilim were destroyed in the flood during the times of Noah? A simple, albeit baseless, idea is that the flood wasn't as thorough as we are led to believe, and that perhaps the Nephilim were able to navigate the turbulent waters and somehow find their way to dry land once the water levels reduced. Another similar idea is that the Nephilim, after being warned by Enoch of their fate as they are in the Book of Giants, went into hiding and were somehow able to escape the flood through either some clever ingenuity or some archaic magic. Of course, these ideas seem two-dimensional and lack any real substance that is really convincing. They're more akin to those bad Star Wars movies where somehow Palpatine returned, and likewise, somehow the Nephilim returned too. So how do we come up with a more legitimate explanation? Well, to do that, we'll need to acknowledge that perhaps these aren't the same Nephilim from the days of Noah, because all of those were indeed wiped out in the flood, but that these Nephilim are brand new, or at least more recent. If we assume that these more recent Nephilim were created the same way that the originals were, then it might be suggested that there were other fallen angels who had fallen into the same trap as the Watchers and had come down to earth to lay with mortal women. The original Watchers, according to the Enochian legend, were rounded up by the archangels and actually cast down into an underground prison thousands of miles beneath the desert known as the Duodel. These angels, according to the legends, are said to still be there now, where they undergo great suffering and torment for their open rebellion against God and for their infringement upon His rules. As the events of Numbers take place many years after the times of the Watchers, or the sons of God, it can be assumed that these were also brand new angels who fathered these Nephilim, those who evidently did not learn from the mistakes of those who came before them, or perhaps didn't know about them altogether. Another idea here is that indeed, the angels, regardless of their time of existence, did know about the folly of the Watchers, but that they were still unable to resist the temptation of mortal women. Hence why Nephilim are reported as being seen here in Canaan. But if we don't think that the angels would make the same mistake twice, there are some other ideas available, one of which causes us to challenge the idea that the sons of God, as mentioned in Genesis 6 verse 4, apply to angels or whether it applies to men. Now, if men are actually the sons of God, then men are the ones who bring forth the Nephilim by sleeping with women. But how can this be? Well, again, there's a lot of speculation here. But one idea is that when Canaan, who is Noah's son and the first Canaanite, is cursed by his father, his descendants become cursed too. The sons of Shem and Japheth, these being Canaan's brothers, and thus the nephews of Canaan, may have at some point intermingled with the daughters of Canaan, this being something of a violation in the eyes of God. Time and time again, we see God warn those apart from His covenant not to make wives out of the Canaanite women. And yet time and time again, we see many of the covenants do exactly that. These new Nephilim therefore can be seen as a direct consequence of the chosen people of Israel who have fornicated with the cursed people of Canaan, furthermore exemplifying why the two did not belong together, because together they could only create something as abominable as more Nephilim. Unfortunately, this is only a simple idea that cannot be substantiated. And it is indeed more likely that the sons of God refer to fallen angels, because man would be the son of man, this man being Adam, not God. This brings me to the final idea I have on this account from Numbers 13, the idea that the scouts hadn't seen Nephilim at all, but either mistook some of the tall men of Canaan for giants or had been so afraid about invading Canaan with its reinforced cities, strong fortifications, and powerful men, that they made the whole thing up to dissuade Moses from agreeing with Caleb, who wanted to go up into Canaan and take the land by force. You'll notice that Numbers tell us that the scouts spread a bad report, which implies that whatever he told Moses was either a misinterpretation down to sheer ignorance or a complete fabrication made out of fear for the Canaanites. The idea that the scouts were fearful of the Canaanites, leading them to make up the report about the Nephilim, can be legitimized by the fact that the scout does declare to Moses that they cannot attack the Canaanites because he believed they were so much stronger than them. On the other hand, the idea that the scout had simply misinterpreted what he saw can also be legitimized by the scout's report that the descendants of Anak had come from the Nephilim and that these were the giants he was supposedly seeing. Anak, a word believed to mean giant in Hebrew, was also a minor character in the Bible and is named as being the progenitor of the Anakites, or the Anakim, these being the people who inhabited Canaan before the arrival of the Israelites. Of course, this just leaves us with more questions. How did these Anakim come into existence? How tall were they? Were they as big and ferocious as their Nephilim forefathers, or were they smaller and more docile? What was their nature in comparison to their evil fathers, and perhaps more importantly, were they a product of Nephilim human relations, or were these the product of men sleeping with Canaanite women, hence why they existed after the flood? Unfortunately, we may never really know. What we do know is that the biblical attitude towards both Nephilim and Anakim is similar. Both are living examples of sin, and both are destined to be removed from the earth. The Nephilim, as we know, were removed by the flood, but the Anakim, as we later learn in the Bible, are all destroyed by Caleb and Joshua. We are told specifically of this in Joshua's chapter. At that time, Joshua went and destroyed the Anakites from the hill country, from Hebron, Debir, and Anab, from all the hill country of Judah, and from all the hill country of Israel. Joshua totally destroyed them and their towns. Joshua 11:21. Beyond Joshua's encounter with the Anakim, we don't see the giants maintain any significant prominence that would indicate they were too much of a problem. Indeed, we do see David encounter what can be presumed as giants in the second book of Samuel. In these passages, he and his mighty men face formidable adversaries, such as Ishbi-Benob, a giant who wielded a spear with a head weighing an astonishing 300 shekels. Additionally, David confronts Goliath's brother and yet another giant, a man of extraordinary stature, notable for having 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. Some scholars endeavor to attribute this figure to Gilgamesh, weaving ancient connections between disparate legends. These giants are all believed to have descended from Rapha, a lineage that assumes the name Raphaim. This designation likely serves to distinguish them from other giant races, such as the Nephilim and the Anakim. By this logic, whether we discuss the Raphaim, Anakim, or any other giants mentioned in the Bible, it is conceivable that they were at some point grouped under the umbrella term of Nephilim, primarily due to their immense size. The people who reportedly saw these giants during biblical times would not have lived during the era of the flood, and thus could not definitively know whether the giants they encountered were Nephilim. Yet because of their fearsome, terrifying, and abnormal appearances, the term Nephilim was easily assigned to them, as evidenced by the scouts' reports in Numbers 13. Therefore, one might suggest that the Nephilim of old did not survive the flood. These original Nephilim, with their supernatural heritage derived from their angelic fathers, were wiped out. Every other giant since then, however, may have been misappropriated under the term Nephilim, despite their lack of angelic parentage and monstrous traits. In fact, the only characteristic these later giants shared with the Nephilim was their unfortunate position on the losing side when God intervened on behalf of his chosen people. The post-flood giants, often lumped together under the name Nephilim, were formidable in their own right. Yet they were distinct from the original Nephilim. Their might and terror invoked memories and legends of the ancient giants, leading to their misidentification. The biblical accounts of these giants, from the fierce battles with David to the scouts' fearful reports, illustrate the lasting impact of the Nephilim legend on the collective memory and language of those times. As we reach the conclusion of our exploration, it becomes clear that the term Nephilim, while rooted in a specific ancient context, evolved to encompass various giants encountered throughout biblical history. These giants, whether Rephaim or Anakim, were not the progeny of fallen angels, yet their formidable presence warranted the same fearful respect. We have reached the end of our video, and I hope you found it insightful and engaging. If you're seeking inspiration, knowledge, and a deeper spiritual connection, don't let this opportunity pass you by. Subscribe to our channel now, leave a like, and comment to strengthen our community. And if you wish to support us in continuing to share religious stories that touch hearts, consider becoming a channel member. Together, we can make a difference and strengthen our spiritual journey. God bless you.